I want to tell you this like someone told it to me quietly, without drama. It started as a normal evening, the kind where nothing feels important until it suddenly is. No one in that hotel knew who she really was. Not the guests drifting through the marble lobby, not the staff rushing between shifts, and definitely not the manager who thought power lived only in loud voices and uniforms. She checked in alone, carrying her own small suitcase. Simple coat, no jewelry, no assistant walking behind her. She smiled when the receptionist asked her name, spoke softly and thanked her twice for the room key. The girl at the desk barely looked up. Another guest, another face. This was her hotel. But she didn't say that. She liked coming like this sometimes, anonymously, quietly. It reminded her why she had built the company in the first place. Her father had once run a tiny roadside inn, cleaning rooms himself after guests left. He used to say, if you forget what it feels like to serve, you shouldn't lead. Those words stayed with her long after he was gone. The lobby smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. A pianist played softly in the corner. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. She noticed the way staff avoided eye contact, how their smiles were tight, rehearsed. Fear, she thought, not respect. She went upstairs to her room, changed into plain clothes, then came back down to the restaurant. She wanted dinner like a normal guest. No priority, no special table. The restaurant was busy. Waiters moved fast, faces tense. She stood near the entrance for a moment, waiting to be noticed. Minutes passed. Couples were seated ahead of her. A man snapped his fingers at a server. Another complained loudly about his wine. Finally, she stepped forward gently. "Excuse me," she said to a passing waiter, her voice calm. "Is there a table for one?" He didn't stop walking, didn't even turn his head. "Wait your turn," he muttered. She stepped back, surprised but composed. Patience came easily to her. She had waited years to build what she had. A few minutes meant nothing. Then the manager appeared. He was tall, confident, wearing authority like armor. His eyes scanned the room, not for problems but for obedience. He noticed her standing there and frowned, as if her presence itself was an inconvenience. "You can't stand here," he said sharply. "I'm sorry," she replied. "I was just asking about a table." "We're full," he snapped. "Can't you see that?" She glanced around, 3 empty tables near the window, untouched. "I don't mind waiting," she said, "or even sitting there when it's ready." Something in her calm irritated him. People like him expected fear, gratitude, submission. "Listen," he said, stepping closer. "You don't tell me how to run my restaurant." Other guests were watching now. The room felt tighter. She held his gaze, still gentle. "I didn't mean any disrespect." That was when it happened. His hand moved faster than anyone expected. A sharp sound cut through the restaurant. Silence followed. He had slapped her. The room froze, forks paused midair, the pianist stopped playing. Her face burned not from pain but from shock. She had been yelled at before, underestimated, ignored, but this was something else. She didn't cry, she didn't shout. She slowly lifted her hand to her cheek, took a breath, and looked at him with something deeper than anger. "Sadness. You shouldn't do that to anyone," she said quietly. The manager scoffed. "Get out before I call security." For a moment she considered saying who she was. One sentence could end this. One name, one title, and everything would flip. Apologies, panic, excuses. But she didn't. She walked out of the restaurant, every step steady, every eye on her back. In the hallway, away from the crowd, she leaned against the wall. Her hands trembled now, not because she felt weak, but because she felt the weight of something broken. This wasn't about her anymore. She thought of the receptionist who wouldn't look up, the waiter who wouldn't stop, the fear she had sensed the moment she entered. This was a culture, and it was rotting from the inside. She pulled out her phone. There were numbers saved there that almost no one used anymore. Emergency contacts, silent buttons. She didn't dial right away. Instead, she asked herself a question she always asked before making a hard decision. What would my father do? Her answer came instantly. 10 minutes later, the general staff meeting alarm rang throughout the hotel. Managers were confused, guests annoyed, employees nervous. Downstairs, the same manager adjusted his jacket, already irritated. He had no idea that the quiet woman he slapped was now standing in a private office upstairs, her cheek still red, her voice steady as she spoke into the phone. "I need the full staff list," she said. "Everyone on duty tonight, and I need you here now." The person on the other end didn't question her. They never did. She ended the call and looked out the window at the city lights. Her reflection stared back at her, calm, controlled, resolved. This hotel was about to learn the difference between power and authority. And the manager who thought he ruled everything was about to discover who he had really raised his hand against. The conference room on the top floor had always been reserved for investors and celebrations. Tonight it felt different, colder. The lights were bright but unforgiving, revealing every crease in every suit, every nervous glance. She sat at the long table alone, hands folded, posture straight, no makeup to hide the mark on her cheek. She wanted it visible, not as a weapon but as truth. Downstairs, confusion spread fast. Staff were pulled from their stations one by one. The receptionist whispered to the bellhop. Waiters exchanged looks. The kitchen went silent. No one knew why they were being summoned, only that it felt serious. The manager who had slapped her rolled his eyes as he walked toward the elevators, annoyed at the interruption. "Probably another inspection," he muttered. "They always overreact." When the doors opened on the top floor, the mood shifted. Security stood quietly at the entrance, not aggressive, just present, the kind of presence that makes people straighten their backs without knowing why. They filed into the room slowly, nearly everyone. Servers, cleaners, supervisors, junior managers. The head manager walked in last, confident as ever, phone still in hand. As she stood, the room fell silent. Some of them recognized her now, not fully, just a flicker of familiarity, like a name on a plaque you've walked past 100 times but never stopped to read. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said, her voice calm, controlled, not loud, not angry. The head manager leaned back in his chair. "With all due respect, this could have waited. We are in the middle of service." She looked at him, really looked at him, not with hatred but with clarity. "No," she replied softly, "this couldn't wait." A screen behind her lit up. The hotel's logo appeared, then another slide, then another. Internal metrics, staff turnover rates, anonymous complaints, incident reports that had been ignored, buried, closed without action. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some employees lowered their eyes. Others stared at the floor, hearts pounding. A few looked confused, like they were seeing their daily suffering translated into numbers for the first time. "I came here tonight as a guest," she continued. "Not to test anyone, not to trap anyone. I came because I wanted to feel what this place feels like from the inside." She paused, letting that sink in. "What I felt," she said, "was fear." The word landed hard. The head manager scoffed. "Fear? This is a 5-star hotel, our guests are satisfied." "I wasn't talking about the guests," she said. Her eyes moved across the room, slowly, deliberately. "I was talking about you." Something shifted then, a crack in the manager's expression, just for a moment. She turned slightly, showing her cheek. The mark had darkened now. "Does anyone want to explain this?" Silence. The waiter who had ignored her swallowed hard. The receptionist's hands trembled. The pianist from the lobby stood frozen near the back wall, eyes wide. The manager laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "This is ridiculous. If someone touched you, it was probably a misunderstanding. Guests exaggerate all the time." She nodded slowly. "I agree, misunderstandings happen." Then she looked straight at him. "So do patterns." She pressed a button on the remote. The screen changed again, security footage, time-stamped, clear. The room watched as the video played, her standing calmly, his step forward, his hand moving, the slap. No sound, just the image. When it ended, the silence was heavy, suffocating. The manager stood up abruptly. "You invaded my workplace, you provoked me, you." "Sit down," she said quietly. Something in her voice stopped him mid-sentence. Not authority shouted, authority earned. He sat. "You didn't slap a guest," she continued. "You slapped a human being, and you did it because you thought no one would stop you." She took a breath. This was the part that hurt more than the sting on her face. "But what breaks my heart," she said, "is that some of you weren't surprised. A few employees flinched. That tells me everything." She walked to the window, looking down at the city below. This company was built on dignity, on respect. Somewhere along the way that got lost, not overnight, slowly, quietly, the most dangerous way. She turned back. "I am not here to punish anger," she said. "I am here to end abuse." The manager shook his head, his confidence cracking now. "You can't do this, you don't even know who I am." A faint, almost sad smile crossed her face. "You're right," she said, "but you have no idea who I am." She reached into her bag and placed a single card on the table. Simple, white, her name, her title. CEO. The room erupted into gasps. Hands flew to mouths, eyes widened. A few people sat down hard as if their legs had suddenly given up. The manager's face drained of color. "This meeting isn't over," she said calmly. "It's just beginning." And somewhere deep in the room, beneath the fear and shock, something else stirred for the first time in a long while. Hope. No one spoke after that, not because they were ordered to be silent, but because every word suddenly felt dangerous. The title on that card changed the air in the room. It wasn't power that scared them, it was accountability. She took her seat again slowly, giving everyone time to breathe. Some stared at the table. Others stared at her, trying to reconcile the quiet woman from the restaurant with the person who now held their futures in her hands. The manager couldn't look at her anymore. His confidence had collapsed inward, turning sharp and desperate. "This is blown out of proportion," he said finally, his voice lower now. "I've been under pressure, guests are difficult, staff are slow, sometimes you have to be firm." She nodded, as if she had heard that explanation many times before. "Pressure doesn't create character," she said softly, "it reveals it." She turned toward the staff. "I want to hear from you, not all at once, not if you're afraid, but I need the truth." No one moved. Fear is a powerful thing. It teaches people how to survive by staying quiet. She saw it in their faces and felt something tighten in her chest. "No retaliation will be tolerated," she said. "Not tonight, not ever. Anyone who speaks will be protected. If that promise is broken, it will be broken by me." A long pause followed. Then a housekeeper raised her hand. She was older, hands rough from years of work. Her voice shook, but she stood. "He yells," she said, "a lot, at everyone. If rooms aren't perfect, if towels are folded wrong, he calls us useless." The manager laughed nervously. "Come on, that's not abuse, that's standards." She didn't interrupt, she let the woman finish. "Last month," the housekeeper continued, "my son was in the hospital. I asked for one night off. He said if I left, I shouldn't come back." The room felt heavier. Another hand went up, a young waiter, the same one who had ignored her earlier. "He makes us pay for mistakes," he said quietly. "Broken glasses, wrong orders, it comes out of our tips." The manager slammed his palm on the table. "That's discipline." She finally stepped in. "No," she said firmly, "that's illegal." The manager froze. More hands rose now, one after another. A supervisor spoke about forced overtime. A receptionist described being humiliated in front of guests. A cook talked about threats, schedules changed as punishment, hours cut for speaking up. She listened to every word. She didn't take notes, she didn't interrupt. She held their pain in her attention, the way her father once held tired guest stories at the front desk of his small inn. When the last voice faded, the room was quiet again, different now, raw. She turned to the manager. "Do you want to respond?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The room no longer belonged to him. She stood. "This is not one bad moment," she said. "This is a system, and systems don't change with apologies alone." She nodded to security at the door. "Effective immediately," she said. "You are suspended pending investigation." His chair scraped loudly as he stood. "You can't suspend me based on stories." She met his eyes, steady and unafraid. "I can," she said, "and I will." Security stepped forward, not forceful, just final. As he was escorted out, something unexpected happened. No applause, no cheers, just quiet breathing, relief mixed with disbelief. She turned back to the staff. "What happened tonight doesn't disappear when he leaves the room," she said. "Some of you may still feel afraid tomorrow. That tells me we have more work to do." She walked toward the door, then stopped. There will be a full review, she continued. Leadership changes, anonymous reporting, compensation for what was taken from you. Eyes filled with tears now, not loud crying, the kind that comes when someone finally believes you. But as she reached for the door handle, the young waiter spoke again. Will you actually stay, he asked, or will this be another promise that fades? She paused, her hand still on the door. I'm not leaving tonight, she said, and I'm not leaving this unfinished. She stepped out into the hallway, her phone already buzzing with incoming calls from board members who had just learned what was happening. Inside the room, the staff sat in stunned silence. For the first time, the fear was gone. What replaced it was uncertainty. And that, she knew, was the beginning of real change. The night stretched longer than anyone expected. While the city slept, the hotel stayed awake. Lights burned in offices that were usually dark by midnight. Phones rang softly, then urgently. Legal teams were looped in. Human resources arrived in quiet cars, faces serious, eyes already scanning for damage that could no longer be hidden. She moved through it all without raising her voice. Not because she wasn't angry, but because anger would have made this about her, and this was never about her. She asked for coffee and drank it cold. She sat with documents spread across a long table, reading names, dates, complaints that had once been reduced to resolved without resolution. Every line felt like a small betrayal. Around 2 a.m, she asked for something unusual. I want to speak to the night staff, she said, all of them. Advisors hesitated. It's late, they're exhausted. So am I, she replied, that's why it matters. They gathered again, this time in smaller groups, cleaners with tired eyes, security guards who had learned when not to see things, junior supervisors who had been promoted too fast and trained too little. She didn't stand at the front this time. She pulled up a chair and sat among them. I won't pretend this fixes everything, she said. Trust doesn't return because someone high up says the right words. She looked around the circle. But I need you to hear something clearly. You are not replaceable. This company exists because of you, not despite you. A young woman in housekeeping wiped her eyes with her sleeve. No one has ever said that to us. She felt the weight of that sentence press into her chest. That's on me, she said honestly. I should have been here sooner. The room was quiet, not with fear now, but with something careful, fragile. One of the security guards spoke. What if the next manager is the same? She nodded. Then they won't last. She explained the changes slowly. New leadership protocols, staff councils, direct reporting lines that bypassed local management, outside audits, training that focused on dignity, not just efficiency. And if any of this fails, she added, you won't have to whisper anymore, you'll have my number. There was disbelief in their faces, not doubt, disbelief born from years of being unheard. Before dawn, she walked the hotel alone. She passed the restaurant where it had all started, chairs stacked, lights dim, the air still held echoes of that sharp sound, that moment where something had crossed a line. She stood there for a long time. In the kitchen, she found a young cook cleaning a counter that was already spotless, nervous, overworking. You don't have to do that, she said gently. He looked up, startled. I just don't want to get in trouble. She rested her hands on the counter. You're not in trouble. He hesitated. Are you really the CEO? She smiled faintly. Yes. He swallowed. Then I'm sorry that happened to you. She shook her head. Don't be. I'm sorry it happened to all of you. When the sun finally rose, the hotel looked the same from the outside. Glass shining, flags fluttering, guests waking up unaware of the night that had passed. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. At 8 a.m, she called for one final meeting. Not with staff, with the board. Their faces filled the screen, controlled, concerned, already calculating risk and headlines. She didn't give them time to lead. This isn't a public relations issue, she said. It's a moral one. One board member cleared his throat. The manager was out of line but firing the entire staff. She cut him off, calm but unyielding. No, she said, I'm not firing the staff. A pause. I'm firing the leadership that protected him, every supervisor who ignored reports, every executive who closed cases to keep numbers clean. Silence followed. If that costs us money, she continued, we'll earn it back with integrity. If it costs us time, we'll rebuild slowly, but we will not build on fear. The call ended with reluctant agreement, not because they were convinced, but because they knew she would not bend. She ended the call and leaned back in her chair, finally letting the exhaustion show. Outside the office, staff waited quietly. Word had spread fast. She stepped out and spoke to them simply. No one here is losing their job today, she said, except those who forgot what leadership means. A breath passed through the room, collective, shaky, relieved. But as people began to relax, she felt it. This wasn't over. Because systems resist change. And somewhere beyond this building, consequences were already forming. One she wouldn't be able to control so easily. By the third day, the outside world noticed. Not because of rumors or headlines, but because something felt different. Guests commented on it at breakfast. The way staff stood a little straighter, the way they spoke without fear in their voices. Kindness, real kindness, has a rhythm. Once it starts, people hear it. She stayed. That alone unsettled people. CEOs were not supposed to walk the halls at dawn or eat with housekeeping in the staff cafeteria. They were not supposed to learn names or ask about children or listen without glancing at their phones. But she did all of it quietly, without cameras. And because of that, stories began to surface. A senior supervisor resigned on the second morning. No confrontation, no scene, just a letter left on the desk. Others followed, not fired yet but unwilling to be seen when accountability finally arrived. Still, not everyone welcomed the change. In a closed office on the fourth floor, a regional director sat stiffly across from her. Polished suit, practiced smile, the kind of person who survived by never choosing sides. You've made your point, he said carefully, but this approach is extreme. Morale will suffer, the brand. She held up her hand. Morale was already suffering, she replied. You just weren't listening. He leaned forward. People will talk, lawsuits, investors. She met his gaze. They were already talking, they just weren't being heard. He studied her for a moment. You understand this could cost you your position. A small silence settled between them. If my position requires silence in the face of harm, she said, then it's not a position worth holding. He didn't respond. Some truths don't invite debate. Later that evening, she sat alone in her room. The hotel felt quieter now, but not peaceful. Change is loud even when no one is shouting. She finally looked at herself in the mirror. The mark on her cheek had faded to a dull shadow, almost gone. But she knew the real mark wasn't visible. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered. This is the manager's lawyer, the voice said. My client is claiming wrongful suspension and defamation. She closed her eyes for a moment, not from fear, from fatigue. He assaulted a guest, she said calmly, on camera. He claims provocation. She exhaled slowly. Tell him to prepare for the truth. The call ended. She sat there for a long time, thinking of the staff who had finally spoken, of the housekeepers shaking hands, of the waiter's question, will you actually stay? Outside her door, soft footsteps approached, a knock. It was the young receptionist from the first night, eyes red, holding something in her hands. I just wanted to give this back, she said. It was the room key card from that first evening. I kept it, the girl added quietly. I didn't know why, maybe because it reminded me that someone saw us. She took the card gently. Thank you, she said, for staying. The girl hesitated. I almost quit that night. She nodded. I almost left too. They shared a small, honest smile, the kind built on survival. After the girl left, she sat on the edge of the bed, the key card resting in her palm. She understood now what this would cost her, not just money, not just reputation. It would cost her comfort. Because once you open a door like this, you can't close it again. The board would push back harder, legal battles would come, others in the industry would watch closely, deciding whether to follow or fight. And deep down, she knew something else. This wasn't the only hotel. This wasn't the only system. This was just the first place where silence finally broke. And tomorrow, she would have to decide how far she was willing to go. Because doing the right thing once is brave. Doing it again when the price is higher is something else entirely. The hearing took place 3 months later. By then the hotel had settled into a new rhythm. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. Complaints were answered, schedules were fair, people spoke without lowering their voices when a manager walked by. Some guests noticed, others didn't. Real change rarely announces itself. She no longer stayed in the hotel every night, but she returned often, quietly, checking in the same way she always had. Simple coat, small suitcase, no announcements. The lawsuit unfolded exactly as expected. The former manager claimed stress, misunderstanding, humiliation. His lawyers spoke about reputation and career damage. They never spoke about the slap, not directly. They avoided it like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Then the footage was shown. Again. This time in a room filled with people who couldn't look away. When it ended, there were no dramatic reactions, just a heavy stillness, the kind that means a decision has already been made. The case was dismissed. But that wasn't the end. She stood outside the courthouse afterwards, sunlight warming her face. Reporters waited at a distance, microphones ready. She shook her head gently and walked past them. Not today. This story didn't belong to soundbites. Instead, she went back to the hotel. In the lobby, the receptionist from that first night was working again, standing straighter now, smiling without forcing it. "Welcome back," she said. "Thank you," she replied. "How are things?" The girl paused, then smiled wider. "Better, not perfect, but better." She nodded. That was enough. Later that afternoon, she gathered the staff one last time, not in the conference room, in the lobby itself, where guests passed by and life continued. "I won't pretend this place is fixed forever," she said. "Nothing ever is, but what matters is what you do when something breaks." She looked around at them, familiar faces now, not employees, people. "You taught me something," she continued. "Leadership isn't proven in boardrooms, it's proven in moments where it would be easier to look away." She reached into her pocket and placed the old key card on the front desk. "I came here invisible," she said. "I'm leaving accountable." There was quiet pride in the room, not loud, not dramatic. As she turned to leave, the young waiter called out. "Will you come back like this again?" he asked, "as just a guest?" She smiled. "Yes, and I hope next time no one will need to know who I am." She walked out into the city, blending back into the crowd. No applause, no cameras. Just a woman who had been slapped once and chose not to turn that moment into revenge, but into change. And long after she was gone, people would remember that night not for the shock of what happened in the restaurant, but for the quiet realization that power, when used with courage and humility, can finally make a place safe. Not just for guests, but for everyone who walks through the door.